Welcome back to Bit Distracted Games. My name is Nick, and we'll be continuing our FlatRedBall platformer game. Last video, we discussed how to add new tile sets to your level. This video introduces how to work with entities, a concept in FlatRedBall used to add interactable objects to your game. Entities exist in every FlatRedBall game. Examples of entities include coins you can pick up, enemies that can deal damage, power-ups that you can touch to get stronger, and NPCs you can talk to. In fact, we've been using an entity this whole entire time, the player. We didn't create the player entity ourselves. It was made automatically in the first video when we made the project using the project wizard. We'll add a coin entity to our project since it's one of the simplest types of entities we can create. All entities exist in the entities folder in FlatRedBall. As mentioned earlier, we already have a player entity. This entity is fairly complex, so we will only take a look at a few things to get an idea of how entities are made. We can expand the objects folder under the player entity to look at some of the things it contains. Notice that it has an object called sprite instance. This is used to draw the sprite. It also has a rectangle called axis aligned rectangle instance. This is used for collisions. This type of entity is very common, a single sprite and a single shape for collisions. The player uses an axis aligned rectangle as its collision shape, but games can also use circles for round collisions and polygons for more complex shapes. Now we will create our own coin entity which also has a sprite and a rectangle. To do this, right click on the entities folder and click on add entity. Name this new entity coin and check the option for sprite and axis aligned rectangle. We can leave the remainder of the options as they are, but let's quickly talk about what they are. Notice that implement iCollidable is checked. This means that our entity can support collisions. The word collision in game development means to check and respond to two objects overlapping. Since we're adding a rectangle to our coin, it will support a collision. We'll be covering collisions in our next video. We also have an option for creating a factory for the coin. Factories are objects which help us create new coins after the game has started running. We won't use this feature for coins, but other types of entities are often created after the game has started running. For example, the player may shoot bullets, or an enemy spawner may spawn enemies. Even if we aren't going to use this feature, it's good to keep it checked in case we end up needing it in the future. Finally, notice that the option to add a list to the game screen has been checked. Most entities should be placed in list in the game screen. This makes it easier to perform collisions and to keep things organized. As a reminder, we will be covering collisions in our next video, so definitely want to keep this option checked. Click OK, and the entity shows up under the entities folder. Now that we have defined our coin entity, we can assign variables on our sprite. FlatRedBall sprites are used to display an entire PNG file, or a portion of a PNG file. In the case of a coin, we'll display only a portion. When we work with files, we refer to them as image files or PNG files. Once these images files are loaded in a game, they are referred to as textures. The term texture is common in game development. By default, sprites do not have a texture assigned. This means that they will either not show up or will show up as a small black square. Either way, this is not what we want, so we need to assign our texture. We'll use the same source PNG file that we used previously, but this time we'll directly add this file to our FlatRedBall project. As a reminder, we used texture in previous tutorials for our levels visuals. Also, the texture is used by our player to display running and jumping animations. We know that the source PNG file is already part of our project's content since it's being used for our other files. We can add it directly to our coin entity so that we can assign it to the sprite's texture. To do this, right-click on the coin's files folder, add file, existing files. Notice that we have a window that lets us quickly search for all files that are already part of our contents folder structure, or a browse file that lets us navigate using a Windows file window. We can search for frbeefcake spritesheet.png. As you type, the window should filter down and show you available matches. Select this file and click OK. Notice that the file now shows up under the Coins Files folder. Don't worry, FlatRedBall is smart enough to know that this is the same file that is being used by our tileset and by our player. This allows the file to only be loaded one time when we run our game. Now that the file is part of our coin entity, we can set the texture property on the coin's sprite instance. Select the sprite instance object and make sure you have the variables tab selected. Notice that the texture variable has a drop-down which lets us select which texture to use. Our file appears in this drop-down. Also, as a shortcut, you can drag and drop under the Files item on the Sprite Instance item in the tree view. Setting the texture either way is the same, but FlatRedBall provides the drag and drop shortcut. Now that we've set the texture, we need to tell the sprite which portion of the texture to use. If we don't do this, then the sprite displays the entire texture. That means all of the frames of animation for our character and the entire tile set that we used in the previous videos. To change the coordinates, click on Map Sprite Texture and a window will appear showing the coordinates over here. To change the coordinates, you can grab the corners or edges and manually select the coin. Another way you can do it is if we kind of reset it, within this selection, you can double click exactly what you want. Notice that snapping is enabled and it's set to 16 pixels. This makes it easiest for us to select this coin. Once you have that area selected, click OK. Notice that the 4 texture pixels values are filled in now. If you prefer, you can also type in the 4 values if you happen to know the left, right, top, and bottom. This is the most useful for artists who may already be working in an image editing tool like Photoshop. Next, we'll add a coin to our level 1 screen. Whenever you create an entity, you must add it to either a screen or another entity to see it in the game. This is called an instance. We already have an instance of our player in the game screen, and we'll be adding multiple instances of our coin. The easiest way to add instances to your level is to use Live Edit. We haven't used Live Edit yet, so we need to enable it. To enable Live Edit, click on the blue gear icon in the Game tab to open the Live Editor settings. Check the Enable Live Edit checkbox. And now that Live Edit is enabled, you should see a blue wrench icon over here. This button starts the game in Live Edit mode. Before we click the blue wrench button, make sure to select whatever you want to edit. In this case, we'll edit level 1. So select level 1 in screens. Then click the blue wrench icon. The game should launch in the FRB editor in the Game tab. You can tell that you are in the edit mode because the game shows a white grid overlaying the level. Once in edit mode, you can move around the map by holding down the middle mouse button, along with zooming in and out by scrolling the mouse wheel. In Live Edit, you can select the player and it will also be selected in the tree view. Drag the player to move it closer to the ground. Any changes made here in Live Edit will apply when the game is running. Notice that if you drag the player close to the edge of the screen, the camera scrolls. Notice that the blue wrench is selected as well. We can switch to game mode by pressing the green play button next to the wrench. This is a great way to quickly make and test changes. We can move the player, test the game, and then switch back to Live Edit mode. We can also add coins to our level 1. To do this, push and drag the coin from the Entities folder into your game. Once it has been added, it can be moved just like the player. Feel free to move it around and then run the game. We can add additional coins by dragging and dropping them onto the level from the tree view. Alternatively, we can select a coin in the level, press Ctrl C to copy it, and then Ctrl V to paste it. Now that we've covered how to create new entities, adding sprites, modifying sprite texture coordinates, and adding entity instances to your game in Live Edit, you should already begin to create simple levels. The best way to learn is to try, so feel free to modify the coin entity, make new entities, and add them to your level. As you're trying new things, drop into the FlatRedBall Discord server to ask questions or just say hi. I'll leave a link in the description below. And once again, I'm Nick with Bit Distracted Games. Great job on getting this far. I'm so excited to see your progress, and as always, thank you for watching.